But Van, I want to mention that my brother went to that Monterey school, so this would have probably been around in the early '60s, maybe. And
Mm,
he studied Chinese there. Spent 2 or 3 years in Formosa, monitoring calls from the mainland, and
mm.
he became a scholar of Ming Chinese. But that was his start at that Monterey school.
To me, it's a magical place. Like I was from the wrong side of the tracks growing up, and that was my first taste of a quote unquote like good life or civilized life. Like I had never experienced Italian restaurants. I mean, something as stupid as that, like it just to live a bourgeois experience and to be paid to like study,
Yeah.
like, oh, you're supposed to learn and that's your job. Totally revolutionary concept to me. And so in that place, my mind opened up and I had really low expectations for myself in life until I was told this language, Korean, is super hard to learn and the washout rate was really high. And my peer group had a bunch of people in the military who had like bachelor's degrees, and I didn't even think I qualified for university. And like they were washing out, and I was doing like pretty well. And I'm
Oh,
like, well, wait a minute, if I can learn this, maybe I can learn other shit too. And that it gave me a boost and like it let me indulge my curiosity intellectually.
mhm.
And that it took a while for me to find my political consciousness, but that made all the difference really, like for in just terms of like social mobility or economic mobility, like
Van, I haven't told you this before, but your own story reminds me so much of the story of so many of my Marines who are also linguists and were able to use that skill set and just being like, by virtue of being like signals intelligence Marines, which was like impressive on our resume, were able to also like, step up the educational ladder and then eventually the career ladder, like outside of the military. So like, I feel
hmm,
like like military language learning in particular is like a major like mechanism of social mobility, like more so than like the military is, but like specifically like if you can learn a language while you're in the military, that's huge.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like I it was a joint learning environment, joint service environment. So a third of my colleagues or whatever you call us were were Marines. And so like we were training together, learning together, shooting the shit together.
Dan, I
Yeah.
wanted
All right.
to ask you, can I ask you a question about something you said? That this interests me because I told you just before this that in relation to Lyle's book, Pain is Weakness Leaving the Body, and also with a book that I wanted to make sure I recommended to people. Gosh, I didn't. It's the memoirs of Traudl Junge, who upon whose the book of one of the key books that was the basis of the film that we're going to be talking about.
This is
But she,
Hitler's secretary.
secretary, his
Yeah.
final secretary, the last one that he of the group that he originally had. But her story is one of these coming of age stories, like Lyle's is, and like you just alluded to your own. Could you kind of tell me a little bit more about that? I think the sentence you said was, then you said something like my political coming of age or my
Political
political
consciousness, yeah.
yeah. Can you tell me a little bit? Was that related to the language study itself, or to the people you met while doing it, or
Well, so I
about this?
haven't fully contended with my own history myself, which is one of the reasons why, like, on one level, I feel like I need to write a memoir to sort
Yeah.
through things. But on another level, I find it like extremely daunting and like kind of terrifying. And I would much rather write analytical screeds or, pundity stuff that keeps me out of it. So I don't know, but like one thing that it makes me very different from the foreign policy elites that were my own social class during the Obama years and everything was that, like, when I was in high school, not only was I working class, like like subsistence level working class, but I was acculturated to hip hop and to the Black freedom struggle by way of hip hop. And
Mhm.
so that the sort of Black radical critique was something that was subtly in the background of my own awareness.
Mhm.
And, just like having a Chomsky-esque strong sense of like justice versus injustice, that stayed with me even when I was in the military. And like, I didn't really understand what we were doing in terms of our larger sense of purpose when I was in the military. Like, I took for granted that it was, good American
Yeah,
exceptionalism, and
sure.
it's like, clearly we have good intentions. Clearly, Saddam's a bad guy or terrorists are bad guys and that kind of thing. Kim Jong-il's a bad guy. It was just that simple. And I was like, not addicted to, but like, I was very immersed in what at the time was like hustle culture. So you grind, you wake up, you work hard, kind of like neoliberal mixed with fascism. I mean, like very like personalized advancement
Mhm.
focused.
Good old Puritan ethic sounds like to me.
Yeah, kind of. And my parents are MAGA now, and they raised me in a Rush Limbaugh household, and I rejected it all even back then. But
Mhm.
like I'm sure there was some cultural fingerprints that got into me. Some of the better, more redeemable right wing traits probably made their way into me. And I was like, the global financial crisis hit. And then I started seeing people that I knew like losing their jobs, losing their homes. And I was just starting to go into the Obama administration. And I would go to the mall and I'd see it like the commerce would be totally empty. And there
Mhm.
was something like, like a pang in my stomach or something, like this is fucking not right. Something's off. And I kept putting it out of my head. And then there would be moments where I'd show up to work in the Pentagon, and every day when you come off the escalator and go in and queue in to walk in, there's always anti-war protesters camped outside, and they basically don't say anything to you because they'll get like arrested or whatever, but they're silently holding signs like, whose side are you on? You have a
Mhm.
choice. You don't have to do this. How many kids did you kill today? Like, all these kinds of things. And occasionally, sometimes I would ignore it, but sometimes those pangs would hit me too. And I would get these like flashes of like consciousness, like, wait, whose side am I on?
Yeah.
And that whose side are you on thing also, the first time I heard it was in hip hop in the 90s. And like, there's been this recurring whose side are you on echoing in my head. And mostly I suppressed it until
Mhm.
Trump 1.0. But
Yeah.
occasionally there would be some event that would like come up and it would confront my own psychology. But the Trump years really forced me to have a reckoning with like what I had been part of, and like how poisonous like the fact that the national security state is complicit, not just in defending this highly unequal world that we have, but in creating this highly unequal world that we have. And it's like, dude, if that's what you see, you can't just keep apologizing for empire. Like, you have, as uncomfortable as it is or as costly as it might be, you have to confront this in some way. And so that's kind of been the journey ever since. And like, frankly, like Lyle made his journey still within the US, still without the net of the security net of like, what am I going to do for a living or career stuff. I had the luxury. I don't think if I was under those conditions, I don't think I could have transformed how I thought about all this. Like developing a critical consciousness, physically being away in New Zealand, I think might have been like a condition of possibility for me to like travel a similar path.
It
Well,
sounds like you have a book in you, like a memoir in you. I mean, this
well,
the
you
part
do,
about
man. You
yeah.
definitely don't. I don't know when your time will be to write this book, but you need to do it. Really, honestly, think about it. I mean, I keep feeling. I say it again. The conversion story is really the story every one of us has to tell about
Hmm.
his or her own coming to consciousness in this world. How we go through that, and it's a difficult, painful thing to talk about. Well, Lyle, you did this, and also Colette has done it in her book. And when you Van talked about the 2008 crisis, I'm thinking of Colette's handling of that too. That was kind of like the last of us, well, kind of the final event for her wasn't it? In terms in reading her book about how it really forced her to see what the world that she had been living in, what it was really like, what it was built on.
I wish she was in this conversation. I wish she could hear this, but yeah, she's like in the other room right now. Yeah.
Well, I'm just so taken by it. And also, I want to go back to Trial Junge, because the book that, let me just grab it. I just want to show it to you. So you guys have a record. I just want to make sure this is known.
Yeah, and man, while he's doing that, man, what you said about like which side are you on? I mean, that's an incredible like motif right there that you could kind of use throughout the narrative. I think that's like very powerful.
Yeah. Well, if I act on this, you're in the acknowledgments.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
You could even start with that scene of like these people just silently holding signs and it not making sense to you for a while, but like it having like a long-term impact. I think there's a lot to be said for that alone, like the kind of like silent infiltration of this one idea. Which side are you on? Is very interesting.
Yeah, and it's also visual. I like the idea that you gave us a picture of it, of people outside the Pentagon. I can see the cover of the book. I mean, the way that
that's funny. I was not telling a story. I was just like trying to explain something to you guys.
Yeah, but it came out. All right, it came out. We heard it.
Yeah.
We're witnesses.
That's when it always comes out. It's whenever like I'm like someone's like, all right, give me the thesis to your next book or whatever. Like that's when I mess up. It's always it's always like spontaneous. That's when the brilliance comes out.
Well, when you wrote your memoir, I mean, like, was it a like emotionally torturous process? Were you like depressed at any points? I mean, like,
yeah, I mean, I actually like had like serious mental health issues, like writing it.
See, that's like, I would rather avoid that, honestly. Like,
yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, for me, it was just like a lot of paranoid thoughts. Like while I was putting this down, I'm like, my God, what is my editor going to think of me? What is, the eventual reader going to think of me? What is my wife going to think of me? What is my family members going to think of me? What are my fellow veterans going to think of me? So
make you spiral. Yeah.
Yeah. And because you're like putting like with the memoir form, you're really, if you really want to go deep, you're like, you're naked before you're
that's
inquisitor.
The fear. Yeah. It's like that dream where you're on the stage in front of your school naked or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think this is critical for good writing. I taught writing I was an English teacher that was my career in college, high school. But helping kids understand their relation to their own identity as a fluid thing. It's never going to be fixed, and to understand that language is so ambiguous because it's a public invention. I mean, it's a communal product, but we all try to make it serve our own private needs of expression. So there's always a kind of an ambiguity built into anything we say about ourselves. And so when we write, we also have to be aware the reader's going through the same kind of pressure too, to figure out who he or she is as he or she reads, and how the act of reading itself is a kind of should require a kind of a challenge to the whole way that we look at the world, because it forces us to see the language we use in a different light. It should do that rather than simply to confirm what we all already are thinking in our heads. So I think that the more one confronts that kind of reality in one's own effort to express these hard thoughts, you get a sense of how hard it is for people to process what we read, what we've written, and but we want them to join us in this common search for meaning, which is never going to end. So I just love that the agony of it, but also the pulse of life that comes through it. When I read Lyle's book or Colette's, I'm caught up in the ambiguity of their struggle. Like both of your books, Lyle and Colette's, they're books about the ambiguity of your in your case, Lyle, kind of your feeling about America. It's both love-hate. I mean, it's constantly struggling over how you feel about this place and yourself in it. And also Colette, looking back and looking forward and not knowing which way to go. And then that struggle is kind of the human journey, I think, always.
Well, George, you truly are the ideal reader. I'm not just saying that, and I don't say that to most people because they just aren't the ideal reader, but you really are. And the review you did for my book was really beautiful. And I remember one time I wrote a paper for one of my favorite English professors in college. He was a James Joyce scholar, and I took his course on James Joyce. And he gave, when the first time I got an A on a big paper that I sent to him, he said, like, I applaud you for I'm like extremely impressed with your presence of mind, like throughout this essay. Like he used the phrase presence.
Isn't that a wonderful phrase?
And yeah. And that's what I thought of when I read your review of my book. Like, you clearly read my book with a real presence of mind, and that's like what every writer wants. They want their reader to actually be fully present. It was like in the beginning when I was doing this bullshit job, you were like, no, I'd rather you wait till you're done with it so then you can be fully present with me. And that's what all readers want. So yeah, that meant a lot to me, because I feel like even some of the reviews I got in like the major publications, like most of them were good and I'm very grateful for them, but there were a few where I was like, that person, like the Kirkus review, like I don't think the Kirkus review person really read my book with a presence of mind. I think it was more like,
I understand the difference. I was taught to close read back in the day when that was kind of like the way that you approached language, and I still do that. I've always thought that was never an ideological thing. It wasn't a kind of a theoretical construct. Close reading, all it is paying attention to words, how they work, how they operate, what are they doing on the page, why is one coming before another. What difference does it make that it's that way rather than another? How do you are affected by the fact that they're arranged in this way and that they do that kind of thing? Like the title of your book, Pain is Weakness Leaving the Body. I think a lot of part of that, I got carried away by just the weirdness of that phrase. I mean, just the strength. I talk about it, Lyle, in the post I did of your book. I mean, I just felt like anybody who thinks that that's a way to think about life is going to end up in a knot, because it's logically taking you in two different directions at once, and you can't work your way out of that. It's like you're deliberately being tied up in a knot. You can't struggle out of it. It's not helping at all. Unless
the title was so compelling for that reason.
Yes, I know. That's why it was a great title.
Unfortunately, and I would say the root of all our problems is young men that are stuck up in that knot, and some young women for that matter.
Just makes it worse. Is basically it. Yeah. Hey, this is lovely. You can want, but we should talk about.
We should get to the movie. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say before we start the recording is the reason I really wanted to have you on here is because you're like, you're an expert of close reading, or I feel like expert doesn't do it justice, but that's your thing. You're like, your whole thing is close reading. You're teaching close reading as a long-time teacher.
It's basically paying attention. That's all it is.